But Jo Jones she's autistic. I am also autistic, and I have been socialized within an inch of my life. So I'm pretty good at people sometimes, so I do my best. But Jo, I've allowed her the freedom to be a little bit more, showing her autism a bit more than I sometimes have the right or the ability to do in terms of masking and stuff. So she's in her late 30s. She's lost her job and her husband and her mother kind of in short order. She's divorced and she moves to England to try and restart her life. And women are statistically underdiagnosed with autism, and so what happens is we don't find out until we're adults, and there's not a lot of resources for adults who have autism, right? There's more resources for kids. And so as a result, she has to build her own support network, her own community, and to claim her autism and define herself in her own way. And that's a big part of what she does. But so in terms of some of her more autistic traits, she loves words. I like words. And you know how you like come across a really good word, you just want to like solicitor. That's a good one. You know, I just want to roll it around in my mouth. And so she does a lot of that. And she thinks in a kind of quirky way, much the way I think. And that allows her to sometimes see things and patterns that other people miss. So that's part of it. But she's also trying to solve her own family mystery. After the death of her mother, she inherits this property in England, and she didn't know she had any family at all in England. She thought she was the last member of her family still alive. So she begins searching in both books in different ways to find out more about her family history. So that's the mystery she's mainly interested in. It's just that, like, murders are super inconvenient. And, like, people just get murdered.
Especially when they happen close to home.
Right, you know, and I mean, I don't even think, like, it kind of happens really soon. Like, in the first couple of pages of the book, she's like, oops, oopsies, another one. And she gets all wrapped up in it. But James McAdams is the actual detective, and he's very sort of surly. He's a divorced detective. He's in his early 40s, mid-40s. And he has, he just can't, like, Jo just somehow gets around. He just doesn't know how to get his head around Jo, and she keeps being this way. And I have lived in England at different times, and there's a lot of people who can't tell whether or not, like, I'm autistic or if that's just what Americans are like. So, and it's my fault, in fact, that there are people in North Yorkshire who believe that you're all this way. So just like, that's just an American thing, we think. But it's, you know, so she has that kind of to deal with as well, and it's part of he's trying to figure her out and solve, you know, inconvenient murders. So it is like a police procedural as well, in addition to the fact that it's less cozy maybe in some ways.
Yeah, I don't know if it's because it's set in North Yorkshire and there's a lot of antique stuff around that it feels like a cozy.
Yeah.
It feels, but the procedure is quite detailed. The investigative procedure, the forensic people, the way the police interact with each other. And
I've watched a lot of Vera. Vera Stanhope.
Do you do more research than watching Vera? Or
Yeah, I do. Yeah, because I want to make sure that I'm getting the policing part right. And actually like researching exactly how, you know, who can have a firearms license, who can't, you know, all of the kinds of things that would go into it.
Yeah. One of the things I found so interesting, and I can't remember if Jo said it or were in her thoughts, or if you said it for her, Jo, that her mother always thought she didn't have feelings. But the truth is she has so many feelings, and I'm paraphrasing here, but they're so intense that she has to tamp them down, and that's why she comes off as kind of stoic and detached.
Oh yeah, that's from my life. So it's true, and it's partly that I just live overstimulated, essentially, like all the time. As an example, I don't even have pinpoint focus. Like, I'm watching all the things happening in this room all at one time, including some traffic outside. And so it's like, you know, there's a lot coming in on all the feeds all the time. And so when emotions happen, and there's no place to put, I don't know where you put those. Like, they're just every place, right? And so I don't know what to do. What happens is I have a choice. I can melt down, or I can shut down. And so I learned as a kid, meltdowns were kind of punishable by force. And shutdowns, nobody noticed was happening. So you just learn how to kind of be like, okay, we just turn that part off. And I'm pretty compartmentalized, yeah. And then that makes it easier to deal with things, except it also makes people think that you're inhuman or that you don't have emotions, when my emotions just don't look normal. Like, I have them, but they come out in different ways and are, and also the things that upset me are not always the things that upset other people. So, I can be really cut up over something, but I don't look like it, and that means you don't get the support. And one of the problems of masking so much and tamping down so much is that no one knows you need help, and they're just kind of like, well, she's that stoic person who's completely fine all the time, and you're over there going like, hi, I'm drowning, great, yay. So it was really important to me not only to make her authentically autistic, but to have her have a meltdown that you could see as a reader. So I've never seen this done in a book before, ever. Where you're inside her head as it happens. You're not watching it from the outside. You're in her head and you're watching why this is happening and how it's happening and why terrible carpeting is part of it. And there's really terrible carpeting in this book. Some bad carpet, really bad hotel, really bad carpeting. And how all these things mix together to bring her to her knees, essentially, in what looks like she's like completely over, like, why are you overreacting? She's also female, right? So as women and people who are assigned female at birth are often told, like, you're just overreacting. You're overreacting. Stop. So she has all of these happening, and she's also constantly trying to police herself, which is really painful to watch in the context of the book. But then I have James. So I also let you see what she looks like on the outside. Because so much trouble is like in the translation. So I know I make sense in here, and then people on the outside are, what it is I have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and they go A, they see A and G and go, I don't see the middle bit, like, wow, how did you get there? So that's a lot of this, and I really wanted to get that down because I think it's so important, and it's still a murder mystery. It's not all about that.
No, it is very much a murder mystery. There's a lot of twists and turns, and it moves quite briskly from chapter to chapter. I'm going to make a weird connection here.
I'm all about weird connections.
And I'm not going to assume you know who I'm talking about. Do you know who Larry David is?
Not good with names.
Okay, Larry David. There's a show called Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Oh, that guy, yeah.
He created Seinfeld with Jerry. So when I worked with him every day for 2 years, and it's a spectrum, so I'm not thinking that, I'm not equating those two. But what always amazed me about him is he's really that guy. Like, if you ever see Curb Your Enthusiasm or George and Seinfeld, Larry David's life is really like that. Crazy things might happen, usually from his own making, and he can't help himself. It happens on a daily basis. Yet he can get outside of himself to write about it while still being that guy. And I noticed that through James, you take the outside, more neurotypical point of view.
Well, okay, so this is, alright, so when you're a weird little autistic child, don't be weird is like the mantra that was delivered to me all of my life, right? Don't be weird. This is why I have the Peculiar Book Club, of which a whole bunch of you are here, and our tagline is, if you're weird, you're family, because I was like, this is my people. But, you don't know, you're watching, it's like being in a play, but no one gave you the script, and you're just kind of wandering around going, that's a costume change, I don't know why, what's happening next? So I had to make human beings a special area of study. So I had to make humanity my special interest.
Yeah.
And I treated it like, like scholastically. I took notes, right? And I became so good at reading people. There's a line in the book where Jo says, she's often accused of not being able to read the room, but she is in fact the only one who ever does.
Yeah, she knows, this doesn't give anything away, she notices how someone's hand holds their coffee in a certain way and maybe their eyebrows, their eye movements, that nobody else notices.
Because I'm looking for cues all of my life. So I'm like, okay, they raised an eyebrow, is that a good eyebrow raise? Is that bad? I'm going to take a note, I'm going to take a note. This is my partner, Mark, over here. And like I would overread is that, I saw that before on yesterday, but yesterday he was upset about such and such. So maybe, and I would like make these, imagine a mystery solving board, right, with the red thread, but this is me trying to figure out neurotypical people. And so as a result, I am astonishingly good at stepping outside and writing those characters because, like, you know, you're like my favorite hobby.
It also makes you an ideal crime fiction.
It's true.
Because that is somebody outside of the black box trying to figure out what's going on or what did go on. And that's what you've been doing every day since you were a child.
And now I'm in the wrong field. Like I should be a forensic detective. I'm writing a book. I also write nonfiction. I've written a book on transgender history in the interwar period, but I'm also right now working on a book on the history of forensics. So I mean, you know, things and stuff.
Yeah. The forensics were quite detailed.
Yeah.
But very accessible. It wasn't inaccessible. And in my work, I try not to get too. I'm just so afraid of making a mistake, or not knowing how to say it in lay terms. Do you think you want this series to live on?
I hope so. I actually have 2 more books outlined, but a lot of it depends on whether or not publishers are funny. Like if they don't sell enough books, they're like, eh. So I don't know, but it is actually, a screenplay has been written, and I have a producer, and they're trying to find a director and some other people now, and so that doesn't mean things will get made, by the way, but Kayla Cromer, she was in The Good Doctor, she's an autistic actress, she's attached to the project, she wants to play Jo Jones.
Nice.
Yeah. And so we don't know if that will actually happen, but obviously if that happens, probably there will be more books.
Right.
The third one, if they let me write it, is a Christmas mystery.
Oh, that would be
Right?
awesome.
I know.
Like TV shows have Christmas specials, and
Yeah,
this would be a Christmas
right?
special.
It would be so good. And it'd take place partly in London's Bookseller Alley, I'm just saying.
Now, I'm sure there's a bunch of books, but 2 books that feature autistic characters. One is The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Night, Mark Haddon. I don't know if Mark is
He's not.
right.
And he's wrong.
Okay, that's okay. And the other one is a kid's book, I don't know what, a book called Ginny Moon, which is written by someone who I know is not neurotypical. Are you the only one who's written, not the only neurotypical author, but the only person who's written about it as far as you know,
So,
in a fiction format?
I'm one of, so I only know this because I got on a list. So this year I was featured, I got my whole own feature in the Washington Post, but when the first book came out, I was featured with a couple other people, and they were featuring not autistic people, but people who are neuroatypical. So one is someone who has, it's like aphasia or somebody who has a different kind of neuroatypical viewpoint, and they're writing a book about that, with the character who has that. And then Nita Prose has never quite said for sure how she views herself, but her characters often come off as neuroatypical. I think I'm the only openly autistic author writing an openly autistic character that there is actually anywhere, I think. And also, by the way, that doesn't mean that Jo is necessarily representative of all autistic people. She's definitely a representative of many of my works, but it does. The best description I ever heard, which I thought was really, really effective, and I think some of you might feel like, yeah, okay, I see that. There's hub and spoke. There's like somebody who goes, okay, I go from this to that in a direct line, right? Like I didn't have to go to like B and C or whatever. Whereas I tend to work like island hopping jets, like I have to go here and then over there and over there. I can do it really fast, and I sometimes might even end up at the destination before you.
Right.
But I've gone to 16 other places first. So for instance, okay, I remember that the capital of Vermont is Montpelier because caterpillars do not ride bicycles, and that is hard to explain to people because they don't see all the intermediate stuff. But that's like my brain goes in all these weird ways, and when my brother was very small, because I did very well on tests, my mom thought I could help him study, and my poor brother, they're like, what's what's the capital of Vermont? He's like, caterpillars? Bicycles? Something to do with red bicycles? So, yeah.
So, how does that, the straight question is, what is your fiction writing process? Now that you've told us that you have all these island hopping steps.
Well, so though this book is a murder mystery, you will also find extraordinary content about the way memory works, about art history, about art theft, about Syrian black market antiques trade, because every time I look at something, I'm like, you know what that reminds me of? And then I go, oh, and I go over here to that. But
It all works.
It all works, right?
Yeah.
Because that's how my brain is. I'm like, I can wrap this around. Don't worry. I'm going to bring it back. So it is like going down a rabbit hole, except the rabbit holes are all connected in my world. My rabbit holes are wormholes, I think. And they all come back around, and I eventually tie it back together. The problem is communicating that to people.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted two perspectives in the novel. I wanted you to be inside the head where it makes sense, and outside the head where you realize why it doesn't make sense to other people. Because other people are not trying to be mean. They just look at you and go, why bicycles though? You know, like what I don't and it's a beautiful thing in a way. But I am always constantly also policing myself because, I have to in a general conversation, I'm like, okay, they don't have to know that. Don't tell them that. Don't interrupt those people. They don't need to know about your dead dog. They don't need to know that you're, because I'm always going, and then, not necessary, but part of the process. So when I write books, I tell myself little stories about them. So I write longhand with a fountain pen and paper for fiction. I don't do that for nonfiction because that would be hard.
Yeah.
Harder. So with fiction, and so every night I tell myself the story about what I'm about to do next. I'm like, okay, Brandy, so tomorrow your characters are going to go here to do, that reminds me, while we're at it, we should look up, and it does all these things. But I am giving you real information. I am a historian, of course, so you're getting real information in the book too. Like, you're going to learn so much stuff. Good cocktail party stuff. I'm really bad at cocktail parties, so I just have to bring facts.
Right.
Like the last one I went to was actually with Mark, and I panicked and started talking about dinosaur cloacas. And I was like, they pee, poo, everything, right out the same hole, and just not make. But honestly, I was among engineers, so I don't think
Joe does that. Yeah, Joe just throws out. I don't want to ruin it for everybody else, but there was a great. It was about someone said, "Hey, let's go to this pizzeria. It's really authentic Italian pizza. It's greasy Italian pizza." And then she gives the history of Italian pizza.
Why we?
Yeah, in the Neapolitan. It was brilliant. So I love that. Do you want to read a little bit?
I do want to read a little bit. So part of this glasses. Also, I'm 48, so. But I can't.
It gets worse.
I can't stand those progressives though. So I just have like multiple pairs of glasses with different strengths. Yeah. Which is a problem. Okay, so now that we've talked a little bit about autism, I'm going to share with you what it actually maybe sounds like. All right. So. The man on the doorstep of Joe's cottage dripped rainwater. It trickled from wet-plastered hair to overcoat gun flap and onto the overnight bag clutched under one arm. Joe had remembered to say hello, but that didn't stop him staring at her, all wide-eyed and open-mouthed. It reminded her of a disheveled pigeon after colliding with a window pane. Mr. Ronan Foley? Joe asked, stepping back to give him entry room. Yes. He shuffled onto the flagstone cottage entry. I thought the keys would be in a lockbox. Joe had practiced every opening line, but not this one. She blinked twice. I have keys for you. It's for an attic ensuite in my house. You live here? The way he looked around himself wasn't entirely complimentary. Joe chose the high road. Don't worry, you'll have complete privacy, she insisted. That was the point of going through all the trouble of installing a full bath on the second level, including hoisting a freestanding tub through the attic casements quite a feat when you are 5'4" and 115 pounds soaking wet. Of course, muttered Mr. Foley. You meet all your guests in person. Jo decided not to tell him he was her first guest, or that she locked her knees to keep from bouncing up and down with nervous energy. I've also been doing that all evening. She also fought the urge to ask if he was Irish. Instead, she dangled the keys. The door at the top of the stairs locks with the mini key, she said. The brass ones are for the front door and deadbolt. Thank you, Ms. Jones. Jo Jones. She smiled, probably a little too much. He had a broad face and smile lines, but he wasn't smiling now. Always ask if you can get them something, Tula had said when she informed her about her decision to rent the cottage. It's welcoming. Wise words from the Red Lion innkeeper and the one person Jo considered a truly close friend. She might have suggested what to offer. I could get you something. I can cook. Well, I can warm things up. Actually, I can drive into town and get food, or maybe you're thirsty. Tea, the man said. Of course they would say tea. They were in Yorkshire. Yes, that I can do. And cookies. You don't call them cookies, but little shortbreads with jam in the middle. Maybe it was the fact that Jo had forgotten to call them tea biscuits. Or maybe it was to do with the fact that she wasn't taking breaths between sentences. But the startled pigeon suddenly began to laugh. It worked to change in him, shaking all the stiffness out. Tea biscuits. You're American. You are, aren't you? Was the best she could do, but now he smiled. Delighted, he said, shaking her hand. May I? He pointed up the stairwell, but Jo looked at his wet Macintosh. Obviously, he needed to clean up, and she should, as they say, put the kettle on instead of jawing at him like an idiot. He hadn't actually waited for an answer, though, just gave the keys a jingle and disappeared up the stairs. This wasn't how she pictured her first experience as a host, and she'd run every possible scenario right down to the mise en scene. She'd try again when he came downstairs. Better make it a big plate of biscuits.
Great thing. I'm sure people have a lot of questions. So let's open it up and turn this into more of a conversation.
I like conversations. It's
Yeah.
much less stressful.
Yes. Does anyone have any? Yes.
Have you had a lot of readers come up to you after reading and think like, wait, I have some of these traits, and start to go down that path?
Oh, yeah. So she asked if I had the readers come up to me afterwards and say like, oh, I have some of these traits. I actually got a barrage of emails after the first book where people were like, I might be autistic. How do I find out? You know? Or I had a woman who contacted me and said, I think I understand my daughter for the first time, which was really sweet. Yeah. In fact, my mother also said something quite similar. Actually, what she said was, oh, I didn't realize it was that hard. And I was like, it's kind of hard.
Yeah. Other questions?
Did you taste test any cookies?
Well, I do know about
Biscuits.
Jammy Dodgers, and I didn't read all the way to the part where the reason that Jammy Dodgers were so important to her is because Dodgers reminded her of the Brooklyn Dodgers, but also of the Artful Dodger, and the fact that it's a British novel from the Victorian era and an American baseball team is why she likes them so much.
Do you find when you're talking in general, and I'm not like here, that you go from subject to subject, like you said, and you kind of come back around and then you go backwards and then you do that?
So I'm very well trained not to do that. But I was a teacher for many years. I was a professor. My colleague is here back there. I used to work in the Winona State school system, or in the college there. And I had to not lose my students, of course. So after years of teaching, I did take you on a journey, but we always got to the destination. I made sure that we might have gone on a round robin, but in the end, that would come up in my teaching evaluations. They were like, somehow she always brought it back around. So I do, but I've gotten much better. Frankly, I think a lot more about how I'm accepted and received by other people, about the communication, than I think your average person does, probably, because I've spent so much time translating myself into human speak for folks, and it makes it easier because I try to look at it from their perspective. But when I get nervous, I did some pretty terrible job interviews at different points in time, and I look back with much cringe.
I have a question. So, have you read Schillace?
all of it.
How do you respond to his reasoning process?
So one of the reasons I got involved in mystery writing was because I was looking for a place where I felt at home as a reader. And there weren't, like I said, there's still not very many characters who are openly neurodivergent. But there's a lot of subtext where like Nero Wolfe, Hercule Poirot, Sherlock Holmes, like
Right.
lots and lots and lots of mystery novels, lots and lots of mystery detectives where I was like, yeah, I get that. I feel seen, you know. So I think I gravitated to mystery because I think a lot of mystery detectives in fiction are, probably the authors, I'm assuming,
Right.
are somewhat neuroatypical. And so I felt very comfortable with those folks to the point that it was the one place where I didn't feel, you feel sort of gaslit. You feel like, okay, no one else must think like me. I'm just being this weird person. But then you read, you know, A Study in Scarlet and go,
Right.
I'm not the only one. And so, yeah, I do. I'm such, so we do this special interest thing. And of course, neuroatypical people aren't the only ones, but I do feel like autistic folk have like, you know, an edge perhaps on those people in terms of special interest. But I dive deep. So not only have I read the entire Sherlock Holmes canon, I have read every book written by someone else about Sherlock Holmes.
That's a lot.
I have watched not only have I watched all the various people who played Sherlock Holmes, including Russian ones in translation, I have read the biographies of the people who played Sherlock Holmes, and I have the complete annotation. Oh yeah, it's way worse than it even
Have you been
looks.
to the University of Minnesota Flash? Do you know that?
I know
I
about
think it's
it,
the
but I haven't
big,
been there. Yeah, no, I haven't been there, but I have
I
been
think they're
to.
still open if you want.
Field trip, everybody, let's go. Yeah, so yeah, you know, when you find a home turf, you're gonna dig, right?
Right.
Dig it.
Oh, fascinating. Yes.
Well, you talked a little bit about what made you go into the mystery genre, but I'm curious, you know, with the PhD and the, you know, professional historian job, what made you decide to jump into fiction writing in general?
Gosh, this is actually not a bad question to point to you too, getting out of TV writing and going into this, because it's also an interesting story. Essentially, I always was enamored of fiction and wanted to write fiction, and was told, like I was told many things, that that was simply not possible. People didn't become successful writers of fiction, and you needed to go get something more practical. So I went into the field of business and finance, and I hated that a lot. So I decided to go get a PhD, and I actually, I did historical literature, medical humanities, things like that. Got my PhD and have strangely worked in an anthropology department, a history department, and an English department in various ways because I'm very interdisciplinary. And I started, because they expect you to write books, as it turns out. And so I did. I wrote a book with Andrea, actually, back there. And I also started writing books on the history of death and dying, medical history of various things, for the public. Because I find academic books dull, in general. I mean, I read them, but like, I want to write trade nonfiction for more people than those 11 folks who might read my academic book. So I was working in that area, but I'd always wanted to write fiction. And so I told my agent, who I write this nonfiction, I have one on the history of organ transplant, this is Mr. Hummel and Dr. Butcher. I have this one on the interwar period of transgender rights, in the shadow of the Third Reich. And I told my agent, I was like, you know, I quite like to write fiction. And in fact, I was writing it secretly, because as I was researching these big tomes of history, especially the one where I'm dealing with like the rise of Nazis, and I mean, it's very depressing stuff, and I thought, well, I need something to take myself out of it, you know? So I started writing these mystery novels, longhand in these journals, and I typed one of them up and said, you know, I'd really like to quite take this out. And she's like, oh, I just don't think this is a good idea. I was like, no, really. So she took it out, and like it got snapped up immediately. And she's like, okay, I was wrong. All right, let's see. But this is also an interesting story because the first draft, she read it and goes, maybe you should make the character's autism a bit more obvious. And I went, the character's what? Because I wasn't diagnosed yet. I mean, we kind of knew, I grew up in the 70s, my mom was terribly afraid of stigma and how it would follow me, and so even though I was an impossible child. I couldn't be held, I couldn't be in a room full of people, but I'm hyperlexic, so is the character in the book. So I learned to talk at 8 months old, like in full sentences, and never, ever, ever shut up after that. So she's telling me, she's like, because the character's autistic, she had an autistic niece, and I'm going, what makes you think that? And she's like, well, who did you base her on? And I was like, we don't need to talk about that. So I went to talk to my friend Eric Garcia. Eric Garcia, who wrote We're Not Broken. He's an autistic person himself. He works in Washington, D.C. And I met him, and so I'm chatting with him, and he's like, so when did you first find out that you were autistic? And I was like, I keep being asked this question, and I don't know how to answer it. And he's like, you are. She's like, you know how there's gaydar, there's autidar, like, we know. And so I tell my agent, okay, maybe you're right here. I kind of seeing that you're right. I went through some stuff, figured out that yes, I was autistic. But then I thought, if I'm going to write a book about this, I have to let the world know I, as the author, am autistic too. So I did it in like the most public way I could possibly think of, like writing an article for the Scientific American called "Coming Out Autistic," because as an autistic person, gender's also really weird. So it was very similar to kind of it's a coming out story. And so I came out autistic. And then I wrote another article follow-up called Autism Out Loud, where I was talking about like being honest about yourself. And then I just quit masking, and everyone was so sorry. Like I just quit. And then like 2020 happened, right? And then I didn't see people for a while, and then I freaking forgot how to mask for a bit. And I literally had friends who were like, why are you this way now? When did that happen? How did you come down with autism? I was like, oh, it was there. You didn't see it, but it was there. So I mask a lot less than I used to, because I'm much less polished. I used to be very, not. Now I'm a lot more. But as I say, I've been socialized within an inch of my life, so I'm also pretty good at humaning most of the time. What was the question? I lost my track of myself. That happens.
How did you write fiction?
Oh, right, yes.
Yeah.
Wow, this has been a long answer. I'm sorry. So I said, okay, we're going to make the character more autistic. We're going to make that leap up. And then we sold it, and the editor came back and said, could you make her more autistic, which is never been said in the history of autism. Like, no one has ever told me they want more of that. Like, nobody. And I was like, this is amazing. So I did a lot more of it. And then they bought both books, and so I got to do it again, and it was great. And there's more than one neuroatypical person in the book. There's also someone with ADHD, Gwillem, who is a Welsh antiques dealer, or would be if he actually did his job, as opposed to following Joe Jones around. And there's also trans characters, and there's gay characters. It's just a very, very diverse cast of people. And I felt like for the first time, I got to explore my own autism in fiction in a way that I couldn't even do if I wrote you a nonfiction book about it. So that's kind of how that happened. And then it sold better than my nonfiction. So then I thought I should do maybe more of that. So I wrote a thriller. That it hasn't been sold yet, but it's out. We're working on it. Sorry.
How are we doing on time?
We 15 minutes.
15?
Okay.
Okay.
I'm still hung up on the fountain pen writing. I'm curious to hear more about that. Like, how close do you get to like a finished product, or is it like a rough draft that you then have to edit later, or
Yes.
is it part of your process? Like,
It's so cool. Okay,
I'm
so
interested in this too.
okay, so I'm a very tactile kind of. There's something about the scrape of the nib on paper that is just so real and different from other things, and I feel free to make mistakes on paper that I don't like. The computers are they're very judgmental. Like you open up that just white page, and it's just like, gonna type something? A little blinky cursor, like it's just pressuring you the whole time. I don't know. And then like you spell something wrong and it tells you. Don't tell me that. I don't need to know that right now. So I really find it freeing. And I write almost the entire draft usually in longhand. Not always, but I write a big chunk of it. And then what's great about it is the first time you type it, it's already a second draft because you're fixing it as you type it. It's so cool, right? I love it.
Yes.
So, can I ask you about the scavenger hunt in the book?
Okay, I think so. We gotta avoid spoilers, but we can try. Okay.
Did you? Are those real places, or is this something that you were able to just kind of extrapolate by doing all the research okay, there's going to be this place where we're going to go first, which is in a week here, I can also see you being very, very excited about doing this.
There's a scavenger hunt in addition to bad carpeting. You should get this book for those two reasons alone. So they're either real places or based on real places. In a few cases, it is a real art museum. One of the places they go to is an art museum, and that is really there. The other thing is that I didn't want to get in trouble in some cases, so I picked places and changed important details. So yes, they're real places, but they might not be called that. Like, you couldn't look it up necessarily and find it, except for the art museums. All the art history is real too. Like, all that's real. Like, the whole study on memory. Like, all these. I do give her different books. So whenever she comes up with one of these weird facts, she's compelled to tell you what book she got it out of. So there's all these, like, she footnotes herself. She'll tell you something and be like, blah 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 blah, set in 1973. The book titles are not real, but they are based on real books. Because I also, again, try not to get into trouble.
So do you know how work is gonna end? Like, when you started, do you know how it's gonna end, or you just go with the flow?
That's a great question. So the first one, The Framed Woman of Ardmore House, no, and that's a terrible way to write a mystery novel, to get halfway through and go, I wonder who did it.
I do it every single time.
So the second one,
Yeah.
I was like, all right, I'm gonna know who did it this time. So now what I do is I picture the last scene and I picture the first scene, and then the fun part is trying to build a bridge where they meet in the middle.
That's your specialty.
That's my specialty.
Getting from there to there
Yeah.
in a fun way.
So yeah, so that's how I do it now.
Yes.
I had a question about the gardens. There are some famous gardens in your book. Can you tell us more about that? We do a lot of gardening, you do a lot of gardening. Were there specific plants you were picturing, or?
So in both books, I don't really think I'm spoiling anything by telling you that there's Gertrude Jekyll is a real actual garden designer in history, and that she designed so many, we know many of them are lost. And so I felt like we could have a lost Jekyll Gardens that gets found without stretching the truth very much, because that does happen now and then. And so I actually looked into what kinds of gardens she planted. She wrote extensively about plants and the things that should go in a garden, what she thought was appropriate for a garden. And so that's where I got that's where that comes from. But she's also quite famous for being overlooked because she was female, which is something that is also a theme in the books. So.
Yes.
So you mentioned a lot, like, hearing from autistic readers who are really connected with it. Have you heard at all from UK readers? How do you sort of, like, does the narrative being written by an American, like, does it hold water with your UK readers? What do they think of it?
So the trouble is there's not as many UK readers as I would like there to be, because they didn't release it in the UK. It's just released in the United States. It's funny, they're really not very pleased about Americans who write mystery fiction that takes place in Britain, and then they get especially offended if it's good. Like, they want you to be bad at it. But I actually lived over there quite a lot, and so what I can tell you is that the reader of the second book is Imogen Church, who is a Scotswoman, and who, in addition to doing a lovely job reading the book, felt it was extremely authentic. There's also, because accents are an important part of how some of the mystery gets solved, there's all different kinds of accents in the book, and so finding a reader who could actually, like, do, Newcastle and Geordie and Cockney and all of these things was important as well, and she really felt like it felt very authentic to her.
Did you have anybody that you were with, because you were in England, with the police department, or that you would get some of the information from for how they would solve things?
Unfortunately, no, but there are some good books out there, and one of the nice things about being a historian and a PhD historian is that I'm really good at finding resource material. So I've read an awful lot of books about policing in the UK.
Well, like you said, Farrah,
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
that was one of the good ones too.
Yeah, and I would love, if anyone knows any British detectives that I could meet, please tell me, because that would make it a lot easier than reading a bunch of books.
Yes.
Can I ask you something about very
of our own language within this like normal binary, or is it always going to be abnormal, and is there maybe a way that that's okay?
I think, the one thing that I will always start with is that normal is like a setting on a dryer. Like there's nobody's normal, you know. Everyone is actually a bit atypical, and I like to think about it this way in the sense that I think the problem has come with, it's a problem and a solution in one, right? One is that as disability culture has grown and as people have worked on disability rights and expanded the understanding of how to like support people with disabilities and who are variously differently able, it's also created more and more niche categorization, where once upon a time, you know, there wasn't you weren't autistic and ADHD and where you were just like my weird Uncle Stan, right? Like, you know, my particular peculiar aunt, whatever. The problem with that is also that it's different for men and women. Men frequently are allowed to kind of stretch the boundaries of what is considered normal, and women are kind of smacked into. It's one of the reasons why women are underdiagnosed too, because we're already squished into boxes and that we're trying to fit. And so we don't get a lot of play. We don't get to get outside them without someone sort of smacking you back in. So we've created the language of what is normal, abnormal, as we've tried to provide supports, but labels can be helpful and damaging at the same time. For me, finding autism as a label was incredibly freeing, because what I realized is that it was like taking a mask off to say, I'm autistic. And that allowed me for the first time to ask for accommodation I never felt like I was allowed to have. So it's really important to say like, yeah, I'm weird, I'm peculiar, that's why I have a peculiar book club, I'm strange. And it's not a bad thing, but it is something that's true about me, and I should be able to ask for people to meet me halfway. And then again, when you have these labels, it starts to, instead of saying we're all in this together, we're all kind of on this spectrum of being a little bit different and having to translate our interior to the exterior so that people understand us, we start acting like that's only something neuroatypical people do. When in fact, y'all had to learn the secret handshakes. You're just maybe better at it than me, but like, you know, we're all kind of figuring out how to be with other people and how to communicate with them. And we'd be better off to think that we're just all neuroatypical and we have different strengths and different skills and different abilities as communicators. So I you see what I'm saying? Like it's a solution and a problem at the same time.
Absolutely. I find that often kind of at a secondary thing that's off topic.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with Naya Press? Naya Press, are you familiar? Okay, so they were a lesbian feminist publisher out of Florida from 1973 to 2001. I did my internship for my undergrad in archival studies with them, or on them. And something just to pop in your brain is the bulk of what they published, I would almost say at least half of it was all women detectives, murder mystery. Some of it's
Michelle Marsh.
That is not a name I recognize, but Catherine B. Forrest.
Okay.
And
Michelle Marsh was actually more prolific than Agatha Christie, but people have forgotten all about her work.
Naya Press did a lot of Radcliffe books, right? A lot of lesbian romance as well as mystery.
yeah, they did. I mean, so I won't lecture.
We can talk at the signing part too.
True. But just to like plop that in your brain, they wrote a lot of it, and I have my own theories about why they wrote so much of it between the 70s and 90s, but I haven't done any research. So
Nice. No, I love it. Thank you. You can send that to me.
In your work as an historian, have you looked at the history of what we now call neurodivergent people, and were there differences more valued at one time, or were they other cultures?
Not so. It's really difficult to look at that actually because once again you weren't put in that category.
Right.
But if you look at many Einsteins like if you look at lots and lots of people who were able to think outside the box, it's because they were living outside the box.
Yeah.
or because maybe there is no box.
Right.
And so I think that at some point it would be fun, I think, to write a nonfiction book called Typical, which is actually a history of everyone else. Because we're all a bit weird.
Yeah.
And I think, Temple Grandin is the one who coined the phrase anthropologist on Mars, which he stole to put it on the book title, but it actually is not really what I want. The anthropologist on Mars's perspective. What is it like to be someone who's neuroatypical, looking back at everyone else and going, that's weird as hell? Because there's some strange stuff. The fact that I, as an autistic person, need to be told, right, so does Joe. Joe Jones in the book at one point is like, if you're flirting, you need to say so. Because I'm not going to pick that up from you. And I don't understand why everyone doesn't just tell me. I cannot read tea leaves. Like, please do not expect me to know if you are angry. You should just say, you know what? I am angry. See how easy that is? Like, why don't we just do that? So there's questions that can be asked about what socialization really is for.
Should we, any other questions before we bring you over to the signing table?
Everyone's like, I'm not going to go in.
No, I mean, it's been an hour, so, yeah.
Okay, so I've got my actual fountain pen at the ready, the one that I write with. I guess I can do it with. So you should buy some. And I think all of mine are up there. Plus.
Yeah.
Matt.
Yes, yeah.
I'm just here.